Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I will be your host, Chris, and this, of course, is the show about all things movies and TV. We finally made it to the finale of the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition series here on the show. It's been a crazy couple of months with Fright Nights, Marvel Fridays, a couple of new releases mixed in there. I also do a football podcast, but we are finally capping off our trilogy of Lord of the Rings films. We will return to Middle Earth next year for the 3 Hobbit films, but for right now, we are going to cap off Peter Jackson's masterpiece trilogy with the Return of the King Extended Edition breakdown on today's episode. A couple of reminders before we get into all that. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the cinematic reviews. You can also listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast listening service. Follow the social media pages on X, Facebook, and Instagram. I post all the artwork from the episodes on there, as well as breaking news from Hollywood or anything happening with the show. So with that, let's head on to news and reactions. Today we have one bit of news that just hit the last week or so, and then we have 4 reactions that we're going to do. It's going to be a jam-packed episode today, so we're going to hop right into it with today's news and reaction segment. All right, so the bit of news that we have today is Sydney Sweeney's character Cassie from the HBO Max show Euphoria is set to be a OnlyFans model in season 3. Now, with her character arc going the way it has the first couple seasons of the show, not surprised here that she is going to switch over to that adult content creating platform. It's only been a matter of time. We've seen a couple of characters get thrown into that world in Euphoria, and now we're getting Cassie as a one of, and it's not just a model on OnlyFans. It apparently is like she's like in the top percentage from when the season 3 starts. So that is the newest update that we have on Euphoria. I believe that is set to come out next year, possibly. Let's take a look here. Season 3 of Euphoria release date. So this is set to be released on HBO Max in spring of next year. So that will be coming up here shortly within the next couple months. So that is the news that we have for today. Let's jump into those reactions. We have 4 reactions today. That's the Netflix movie Frankenstein, the Amazon Prime movie Playdate, Disney Plus movie Freakier Friday, which is the sequel to the beloved Freaky Friday movie starring Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis. And then we have Peacock with Nobody 2, is the sequel to the hit movie Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk, which is kind of his version of John Wick. But first up, we'll do the Netflix movie Frankenstein from incredible director Guillermo del Toro, putting his spin on the Frankenstein story. Of course, Frankenstein, huge popular story about over a couple decades to when did the first Frankenstein come out? It's got to be dang near a century, huh? Let's see here. Frankenstein. How do I want to type this? Frankenstein first year. 1818. So well over a century old is the story of Frankenstein. If you're not familiar with Frankenstein, we have Victor Frankenstein, who is played by Oscar Isaac in Del Toro's movie. He creates his own being. I mean, he's essentially playing God in this story where he creates the creature, who's played by Jacob Elordi in the movie. And it's a very fascinating and very Del Toro-like movie. It's the design of the creature is very what you can expect from Guillermo del Toro's movies. I do like the design of the creature. I like the design of everything in this movie. It's a very beautiful looking movie. It's dark when it needs to be dark. It has bright colors when it needs to be bright colors. It's got a lot of cool action and different set pieces like Frankenstein's laboratory and the the shipwreck scene in the Arctic. You have the wedding for Frankenstein's brother. Like, there's different set pieces that are just very beautiful and very Guillermo del Toro-esque, and so to speak, is the vibes that you get in here. But it's very well done, very well acted. It's an incredible movie. I really really enjoyed it. On the popcorn scale, let me pull up all these scales here for today's episode. I gave it 4 popcorn buckets. It's very, very well done. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of on the longer side. It is 2.5 hours long, but it is a very entertaining 2.5 hours long. There wasn't really a spot in here where I was like, I'm pretty bored or this is not really doing it for me. The only reason I didn't give it 5 popcorn buckets was it doesn't feel like that like Oscar hungry movie. It's a very beautiful movie, very well acted movie, but it's a very kind of not necessarily cookie cutter version of the Frankenstein story, but it's kind of like what you would expect it to be. Now, Del Toro, of course, does his own spin, but more so with like the costumes and the set pieces, not really like the story wise. But I mean, there's not a whole lot you can really change with an iconic story like the Frankenstein story. But I think giving it 4 popcorn buckets is still a modest rating on that scale for sure. We also get appearances from Christoph Waltz, who I absolutely love in here, Mia Goth, Charles Dance from the Game of Thrones series. He shows up as Victor's father in a flashback, so it was really cool to see him in here. You also get appearances from Lars Mikkelsen, Felix Gammerer as the Victor's brother William. So there's quite a bit to love about this movie. And if you're a huge Del Toro fan, definitely check this one out. I mean, he did a really good job with the Pinocchio movie that he did a couple years ago. So here he is again, putting his spin on an iconic story such as Frankenstein. So that is Frankenstein with 4 popcorn buckets on the scale. We're going to switch over to Playdate on Amazon Prime. This stars Kevin James and Alan Richardson, who has made a huge name for himself in the most recent years with his Reacher show, also on Prime. But Alan Richardson plays Jeff, and Kevin James plays Brian. These are 2 fathers, and I put them in quotes because Jeff is not a father, so to speak. He's kind of like a father figure in here, but there ends up being this really weird twist to where it's not his CJ's not his kid. It's actually a clone of himself. So he's fathering or mentoring a younger version of himself, and it's a really weird movie. Like when you watch the trailer, like, okay, cool, this is like a cool action kidnapping with Alan Richardson as this secretive spy of maybe some kind of organization, with Kevin James being like the comedic beat of the movie, you know, as this regular father who gets roped up into this really cool action flick. But then they throw that clone side plot revealed to you, and it's just like, where the hell did that come from? It just came out of way left field, and it just really doesn't make any sense. So on that premise alone, I only gave it, let me pull up the scale for that one. Where is it? I only gave it 2 popcorn buckets because on the cover, this looks like a really cool action movie with Alan Richardson and Kevin James. But then as you start getting into it, it's not a great movie. It's pretty weird and not really making much sense. I mean, I laughed a couple times at some of the jokes, but it just didn't really do it for me. I was actually kind of excited for this just based on the cast, and the trailer looked very entertaining. But once you get into it, like I said, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone, and you're kind of just left confused with that clone reveal at the end with CJ and Jeff. So 2 popcorn buckets on that scale. Switching over to Disney Plus, we are going to dive into another legacy sequel with Freakier Friday. Of course, is the sequel to the hit movie Freaky Friday, starring Lindsay Lohan, Jamie Lee Curtis. They do, of course, come back and reprise their roles as Anna, played by Lindsay Lohan, and Tess, who is Lindsay Lohan's mother, Jamie Lee Curtis. They are joined by a brand new cast with their daughter and with Anna's daughter and then her soon-to-be stepdaughter, as she is set to marry Eric. And this is a legacy sequel I actually enjoyed. Now it's nowhere near the original. I mean, the original is so iconic and so beloved that any type of sequel is probably not ever going to touch it. But as sequels go, as legacy sequels goes, I should say, this is actually not that bad. So in this sequel of the movie, as I said, Lindsay Lohan's set to get married. They have her daughter from a previous life, and then they have her fiance's daughter as they start to have disagreement or kind of dig into their disagreements and start to drift apart from each other. The big kind of driving force in this movie is the fact that Lindsay Lohan and her fiance want to move to London in order to be closer with his family. This, of course, is upsetting to her daughter, and it starts to cause a rift between not only Anna and her daughter, but also her daughter and the stepdaughter start to fight with each other. And then they get this crazy scheme where they want to break up their parents in order to kind of live the lives that they want to. And as a teaching lesson, like we saw in the first movie, where the switching of the bodies was meant to make Lindsay Lohan, Jamie Lee Curtis kind of realize their differences and kind of work through it in each other's body. That's sort of the same concept here, where all four of them get mixed up in each other's bodies in order to learn some kind of lesson and kind of grow as a family. And it's pretty entertaining. It's really fun when they switch bodies. The four different actresses who are playing each other, you could tell that they had to do a lot of chemistry studies and talking with each other off and on set in order to give authentic ways, because it's like, for example, Lindsay Lohan has to play Lindsay Lohan, but as if her daughter was in her body. And then the same thing with her daughter. She had to play it as if Lindsay Lohan is in her body. So it could be very, stressful and very, a lot of pressure put on these actors to be able to pull off this performance. And I think they all did really good jobs with the performance. And the movie overall was pretty entertaining. So I am giving it 3 popcorn buckets on the popcorn scale. I can't go any more than that, but I think that's still a pretty modest ranking on there. So definitely check out Freaky Friday on Disney Plus, especially if you are a fan of the original. That one's still a very beloved movie. So I actually watched both of them back to back to each other as like kind of like a double feature night, and that was really fun to see those two together. And then our last reaction for today is Nobody 2, which is currently streaming on Peacock. This is another sequel from Bob Odenkirk. You probably remember the first Nobody film that came out a couple years ago was basically like his version of John Wick. And it's actually a pretty fun version of it. I watched the first one. I did the same thing like I did with Freakier Friday, where I watched the first one and then I watched Nobody 2 as a double feature. I unfortunately didn't get to see this one in theater, and I wished I would have, because this was actually a pretty fun movie. I enjoyed it. It has a lot of the same spirit and soul and entertainment aspect of it as the first one did. I really, really liked the first one. I thought it was a really cool kind of like homage to the John Wick movies and the Jason Statham movies. And it's a type of movie that I never thought I would see Bob Odenkirk do, but he does a fantastic job in it. He's a very cool dad. His name is Hutch, with his wife played by Connie Nielsen, who is incredible as Becca. You get Christopher Lloyd returning as his dad. And you also get his 2 kids, also with an appearance from Colin Hanks as kind of the douchebag sheriff, and a few other casts. They go up against another villain in here, and it's it's your typical cookie cutter villain, but you're really sticking around or checking this movie out based on like the action sequences and Bob Odenkirk, who is an incredible actor. He has got a massive range. Him from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, now switching over to these action movies, and it's really good job by him. He basically spearheads this movie as well as the first movie. I don't think it is as good if you don't have that Bob Odenkirk charm and pizzazz that he carries with him. But I really do like Nobody 2. I think it is a really good sequel. I think there is talks of a third one. It seemed like this one did pretty well in theaters. Let me look at that box office here. So it did. So it had about a $25 million budget, and it almost doubled it. It had about 41 million. So I would say it's pretty decently marketed. I don't think they had to pump in too much money into the marketing. So I would say this was a decent sized hit. You know, it's not as good as the first one. It's tough to beat that first one as just kind of like the first of this franchise and just kind of digging into this world of Hutch and his background. But I think they have been in talks with Bob Odenkirk about a third one, and I'd be on board for the third one. So getting to the popcorn scale, I did give this one 3 popcorn buckets. I really enjoyed it. It's very entertaining. I wish I would have had time to see this in theaters. And definitely check it out on Peacock. It's worth a watch, especially if you are a fan of the first one. It's very, very awesome nod to the John Wick franchise, which has been a huge, massive hit. And I think this is a pretty decent, step down from it, of course, but it does a really good job with the action. So check out Nobody 2 on Peacock today. So that does it for today's news and reactions. We kind of had quite a plate full since it's been a while since we just kind of dived into the streaming. And there's a bunch of streaming movies and shows out there, and we'll get into a couple more later on in the week. I just watched, Wicked for Good, which we're going to do an entire episode on that. That'll be dropping later this week. That was a fun watch in the theaters. It's the first time I've been in the theaters since I went to Tron Ares. And I really enjoyed Wicked, and I'm excited for that episode. But let's get to today's movie, and that is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King Extended Edition.
Every day, Frodo moves closer to Mordor.
Do we know that?
What does your heart tell you?
Come, Master! Come to speak.
It is time. The crownless again shall be king.
Become who you are born to be.
I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails. When we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Whatever happens, stay with me.
This day we fight!
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
They will follow you into battle. You have given us hope.
There is nothing for you here. Only death.
We cannot achieve victory through strength of arms.
Not for ourselves, but we can give Frodo his chance.
All right, we finally made it to the conclusion of Peter Jackson's masterpiece trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, the main story of this whole universe. We eventually spawn out and we get the Hobbit prequels as a trilogy. We get the Rings of Power show. We now have a couple of other movies coming out. We have that animated movie, War of the Rohirrim, that came out last year, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm eager to watch that finally. But here we are. We're at the final installment of this main trilogy, once again directed by Peter Jackson. All the cast members come back for it because they ended up filming all 3 parts together, which is pretty cool. I mean, when you're filming in New Zealand, it makes sense to just film the entire story together since you're on location. But it's an incredible trilogy. It's such a huge masterpiece. We'll get into all the Oscar stuff. I'll dive into the iconic scenes and quotes from this. There's a ton of quotes from this particular part of the trilogy that I'm excited to say on this podcast on favorite quotes. We'll dive into the fun facts on behind the scenes, and then we'll get into the changes from the book, of course, like we did with the previous 2 episodes. But so looking at the budget for this one in particular, it was about $94 million. It grossed $1.1 billion back in 2003, which is outstanding in that age. I think nowadays, if this were to come out today in 2025, this would be a $2 billion movie easily. I wonder what, I need to look up the total budget for that trilogy, though. I'm very curious. Total budget for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Okay, so that's the whole budget is 94. I wonder what the total gross is for that entire trilogy then. So in total, it's estimated to have made $2.9 billion with all three movies, which is freaking incredible for, the 2001, 2002, 2003 era. Now, today, like I said, this is probably $4 billion that they're making off of these movies because it's such a outstanding story, cast, performance, like this is such a beloved franchise that this would make probably twice that amount of money today in 2025 if they were to release these trilogies for the first time. But it's freaking incredible. Peter Jackson, I've talked about already in the first couple episodes, but just kind of refresher. He's most notable for his involvement in Lord of the Rings as well as the Hobbit movies, but he did go direct other movies like The King Kong in 2005 with Jack Black, Adrian Brody, Naomi Watts, like Colin Hanks, Andy Serkis. Like that was. Now we have those, the MonsterVerse movies with Godzilla and King Kong, but that was like the first of like the modern take on King Kong, and I kind of enjoyed it. It's a lot different than like Skull Island, but it was a really good job. It looks like he was involved with the War of the Rohirrim movie as a producer. No surprise there. Like I said, he did the Hobbit movies. He also did. What else did he do here? Looking at his IMDb. Let me pull up this full list here. He mostly has been producing a bunch of stuff, but he did direct some other things like The Frighteners. Back in the 90s, he did Heavenly Creatures, Forgotten Silver, Dead Alive, Meet the Phoebes, Bad Taste, The Valley. I've never seen any of those, but I have seen King Kong. I quite enjoyed his take on there. And then, of course, I have seen the Hobbit movies, which we'll get into those more next year on the show. Those aren't as on the same level as Lord of the Rings, but they're still entertaining nonetheless. So looking at the Oscars here real quick before we get into the cast once again, this has tied for the most Oscar wins with, let me pull this up. I wanted to make sure I wrote this down, with Ben-Hur and Titanic going for 11 winning Oscars. Like it dominated the Oscars in 2004. It won for, let me pull this up, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing, Best Film Editing, Best Art Direction / Set Decoration. Obviously, they're in New Zealand, very, very beautiful country. Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, Best Music, Best Original Song with Into the West, Best Sound Mixing, Best Visual Effects. And then I won a bunch of BAFTA awards and some other awards as well leading up to the Oscars. But that is quite an impressive run there for The Return of the King. And it was nominated for all 11, and it won 11, I believe, is my understanding from my notes here, that it went 11 for 11, which is really, really impressive for a movie to do. But it's had such an incredible run in theaters, and then of course it was a huge Oscar buzz movie, and it took home the gold for everything pretty much. It wiped the floor at the Oscars, which is good to see a movie like this, get its flowers at the end. So diving again into the cast, I won't go into all their IMDb's just because we went through it already in the previous movie episodes. But again, we have Elijah Wood returning as Frodo Baggins. Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf, who is fantastic in here. Sean Astin, who plays Samwise Gamgee, who is freaking incredible in this trilogy, especially in this part. I think he gets the most to do in here. He's basically the hero of the story. where he saves Frodo from Shelob and the orcs, and he's the one that carries Frodo up the mountain so that he could drop the ring in. So he is like the hero of the story, even though Frodo kind of gets credit for destroying the ring and saving the world. It really was on the back of Samwise, and I wanted to give him his flowers for sure, because Sean did a fantastic job as Samwise Gamgee in this trilogy, especially this third part for sure. Billy Boyd returns as Pippin. Dominic Monaghan returns as Merry. Viggo Mortensen, who returns as Aragorn, who is my favorite character in this entire universe. He freaking nailed it, and I can't wait to talk about him when we get to like the scenes and the quotes. Like, he gets all the great quotes. He gets all the really cool scenes. He did a fantastic job in this movie, as well as this entire trilogy. Orlando Bloom returns as Legolas, the elf. John Rhys Davies returns as Gimli, the dwarf. Andy Serkis, of course, reprises his role as Gollum. Bernard Hill returns as King Theoden, who unfortunately dies in the Battle of Minas Tirith. Miranda Otto returns as Eowyn, the niece to Theoden. But then we get John Noble as Denethor, the piece of crap Lord of Gondor, as he's sitting on the throne where Aragorn eventually takes. He is the father of Faramir and Boromir. He is pretty much a douchebag in here, and there's some interesting changes, kind of not really like massive changes, but there were changes to his character from the book into the movie, and we'll dive into those a little later. And then David Wenham returns as Faramir. He gets a really kind of depressing scene where he is almost set on fire by his own father, which is pretty messed up. But luckily, Gandalf and Pippin are there to save him. But that is some dark crap there in the household of Denethor, where he's trying to burn his own freaking son. So before we get into some of the categories here, I just wanted to touch on like the finale of this trilogy. This trilogy is right up there with like the best trilogies ever from like start to finish. You know, you have the Star Wars original trilogy with Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. I mean, you can argue Back to the Future, which I would. I know parts 2 and 3 get a lot of hate, but I think overall that trilogy is so iconic and incredibly well done. You can make an argument for like The Matrix, but I know like Reloaded and Revelations weren't as good as the first one. But I think the one that gets the most comparisons to Lord of the Rings as like top notch beginning to end is probably Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, where you have Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and then I know The Dark Knight Rises gets a lot of hate from a certain group of people, but I think overall that trilogy is like a masterpiece. So I would definitely put that one up there with like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings for sure, and then you can make an argument for Back to the Future, which I think is a masterpiece from beginning to end. And I can argue that all day long until I'm blue in the face. And we'll eventually get to that trilogy. I think that trilogy is actually on the schedule for next year to finally dive into that Back to the Future trilogy. But I just wanted to mention that like this is like the spitting image or the poster child for like this is what a perfect trilogy looks like, where all 3 installments are incredibly well done. They're like almost all in the same, tier. Of course, with the ranking of the trilogy, which we'll get to at the end of the episode, like we always do, you did have to pick one that is over all the other ones. And it's pretty obvious who is one, but like at the 2 and 3 spot, I had quite a bit of trouble, but I think I got it down to where I wanted it. But as a trilogy as a whole, like this is Peter Jackson's masterpiece, and this is what he's always going to be remembered for. I hope they never, ever, redo this trilogy. Kind of like Harry Potter, where you thought that was untouchable, but now they're doing an HBO show. That's my fear, is that HBO or Warner Brothers is going to decide to do that with The Lord of the Rings, where they're going to take this main story and throw it into a, 5-season, run of episodes for this main story. Amazon has Rings of Power. We don't need it. Like this is perfect. We don't need another remake or iteration of this main story. This was absolutely well done, as best as it probably could have been, and at the hands of Peter Jackson. So I want to say kudos to Peter Jackson for for giving us an incredible trilogy. And I think Tolkien would have been very pleased with what Peter Jackson did. Now, I know he did some changes and moved some things around in the trilogy, but he did what he thought was best for his vision and how to bring this story to life on the big screen. And I think he did a very, very well done, job, and the best that he could have probably did. And I think this is the best version that we could ever have asked for from a movie of this of this scale. You know, those books from Tolkien are so beloved, and there's such a huge fan following of the book material. But I think this movie, and I'm in the category of I'm a huge fan of the movie. I haven't read the books. I've only read the Hobbit book back in school, but watching these movies, it makes me want to go back and read those source materials so I can, you know, understand the differences and what Tolkien had envisioned for his mind. I kind of did it the opposite with the Harry Potter ones, where I actually read the books, well, most of the books before the movies came out. So it's you can make a lot of comparisons with Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, I think, with how there's such a massive following of those book material, but there's also an equally and maybe even greater following of just the movie portion. And then you have kind of in the middle there where you have people that love the book material, but they also love and respect the vision of the movie. And I think you can make the same case here for Lord of the Rings. So I like to use Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings as kind of like comparisons because I think they're kind of in the similar boat as each other, where you have, you know, the book fans, the movie fans, and then you have the people in between that love them both or respect both. So I just want to at least give Peter Jackson his flowers on what an incredible finale to his trilogy. And I'm sure that was such a massive, massive, stressful time for him. And then when eventually this movie comes out, it wins 11 Oscars. It's marked as one of the greatest movies and one of the greatest movie trilogies of all time. I'm sure like he had a huge exhale of relief when he saw the reactions to this trilogy. And bravo to him, to Peter Jackson, for doing such a fantastic job on this trilogy, especially this finale conclusion of this Frodo Baggins and the One Ring story. It's fantastic. So let's get into those categories for today. So the first one I just wanted to touch up on, like, what is the future of the Lord of the Rings right now? We do have the Hunt for Gollum, which is the next movie that'll come out in 2027. It's kind of Andy Serkis centered Gollum movie. Sir Ian McKellen is set to come back as Gandalf. I think Viggo Mortensen has shown interest in coming back as Aragorn. Same thing with Orlando Bloom has shown interest in coming back as Legolas. So we could be getting a big reunion here, but this will be focused on Gollum. And then we have the third season of The Rings of Power. The Amazon Prime show will be coming out next year, probably in the fall time is what it sounds like. So we will get a third season of The Rings of Power. And then after that, it sounds like they want to, you know, dive into the Silmarillion a little bit more, which is, you know, off more books in that universe. I think they've talked about maybe expanding, you know, into shows or movies, you know, kind of a sequel to this trilogy. I know it's been brought up that they want to maybe remake this trilogy, which I hope to God they don't. I don't want them to. They don't need to. You know, there's so many other books that they can do in this universe, or different stories they can tell. I mean, we got some pretty good video games out of it. So they could go that route where they just start picking, you know, pieces of the universe instead of like remaking entire movies or books. So, but those two for sure are slated to come out in the next couple of years. The Hunt for Gollum will release in theaters in 2027, and then third season of Rings of Power will premiere on Amazon Prime next year, probably more in the fall time. Seems to be the schedule that they've been following. So diving into the iconic scenes for this final installment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The first one I have is, of course, you know, the opening scene with Smeagol killing his brother. Now, I went to this opening weekend with my dad and my brother. My dad was a huge fan of the books, so he saw all these movies in theaters. And then he eventually, you know, introduced us to these movies, and then he took us to this third movie opening weekend in our hometown. And seeing this in theaters, like, okay, I never read the book. My brother and I never read the book. So like seeing this scene where Smeagol is killing his own brother and having two brothers watch this, it was pretty frightening for us. We're like, what the hell did our dad just take us to? Where these two brothers are fighting over this ring, and one of them ends up getting killed by the other. It was a very, Cain and Abel like thing, and I gotta imagine that's where Tolkien kind of took that idea from, was from the Cain and Abel story in the Bible. So Smeagol killing his brother and it was a pretty violent killing. Like he strangles him on the ground, and you see everything go down, and then eventually we get that that montage of Smeagol slowly turning into Gollum over the years and the decades, and then he loses the ring, of course, to Bilbo. But that scene is very frightening as a kid, especially going to see it with your brother, and you have these two brothers killing each other over a ring. The next one I have is the sword of the King of Gondor being reforged by the elves. I think it's called Narsil, is how you pronounce it. Now, I'm sorry for all you book fans out there if I'm going to butcher some of these names or some of the names of characters or swords or places. So forgive me. But I'm pretty sure you pronounce it Narsil. Is the sword of like the King of Gondor? That it gets the blade was broken. When Sauron was attacking Isildur and his father. So the elves, ordered by Elrond, forge it so that Aragorn can finally, become who he's supposed to be, the heir of Isildur, the King of Gondor. So that was a really cool scene where you have Elrond, talking to Aragorn like, you need to put aside the ranger. You need to become the king as you were born to be. And in the background, we get those flashes of the two elves forging it in Riverdale. Not Riverdale, excuse me, Rivendell. Wow, I had Archie on the brain. Rivendell forged this sword, and it's really cool effect how it's slow motion of the elves, just bang, bang, and you have this really cool speech by Hugo Weaving playing Elrond once again to Aragorn, and it's really, really awesome how they filmed it and pieced it together. Very, very emotional scene there. Then we have Aragorn recruiting the undead army in the mountains. He's also joined by Legolas and Gimli, of course. Some of this was actually only in the extended edition. They cut quite a bit of this out. But it's a really fun scene. You get to see the undead army. There's like thousands of them, in this cave. Aragorn gives this really cool speech about how, I am the Isildur's heir. I think it's in the quotes, actually. If it's not, I think I can remember most of it. No, it is not. So basically, he's like, I'm the Isildur's heir. The leader of the undead army is like, hey, that blade was broken. What the hell are you doing? And then he goes, it's been remade. I want you to swear your oaths to me, and I will set you free once you have fulfilled your oaths to basically help me defeat the armies of Mordor, even though the undead army is just like, we want nothing to do with the humans fighting. Like, we're just going to stay in our cave. We made our sacrifices. We're dead now. We want nothing to do with it. Eventually, Aragorn is like, okay, well, fine. What is one thing that everybody has even wants, and even the undead wants? Well, that's to be free. So he's like, here, swear your oath to me, and then I promise you'll be free of this mountain. You can go roam the lands as much as you want, which he does eventually do. So that was a really cool scene where we get Aragorn convincing this huge undead army to join the forces to fight Mordor. And then we have one of my favorite scenes here where we have Sam going against Shelob, that giant-ass spider in the cave that we think killed Frodo, but it ends up just being stunned by this like sleeping poison or something. We get that really cool scene where she's like wrapping Frodo up in this silk webbing. It's really cool. But we get this cool scene where Frodo's got, or Sam's got, the sword. He's got the light from Galadriel that Frodo got in the first movie, and he's sitting here, he's fighting off Shelob, cuts off a couple of legs, and she runs scared. But that was a really cool action sequence where you get that one part where he's like grabbing onto the teeth of Shelob, and she's like pushing him up against the wall. That was pretty cool action sequence by Sean Astin for sure. The next scene I have is actually an extended scene, and that is Gandalf and Pippin encountering the Witch King on one of the levels of Minas Tirith. It's actually a trailer shot, I think, but they ended up cutting that out and only leaving an extended edition, which was very surprising. And it's like a 20-second scene, but it's really cool. Like, and like the Witch King like recognizes Gandalf to where he says him by name, but it's really cool to see Gandalf and the Witch King kind of like facing off and like showing some mutual respect to each other as powerful supernatural beings, I guess you could call them. But that's a really cool scene. Like when I think of the Return of the King, I think of that encounter there. So it's definitely one of my favorite parts. And then speaking of the Witch King, my next scene I have here is when Eowyn goes up against the Witch King and she ends up killing him. You know, you get that line that he keeps saying, "Oh, no living man can kill me." Well, then Eowyn's like, "Well, I'm no man," and then just sticks the sword right in his face and kills him. But before that, it's actually a pretty good fight. It looks like the Witch King has got her beaten pretty much. He's got this big ass mace looking thing. He's got a sword. Her shield gets shattered and she broke her arm pretty much. But then she ends up winning the fight there against the Witch King. But that was a really cool action sequence. And then we have another extended scene here, and it's a pretty. So it's probably one of my favorite scenes for sure. I think it's actually in competition as one of my favorite scene. So this extended scene is where Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, Pippin, I believe Éomer comes with too. They go up to the Black Gate. You know, Aragorn's like, "Okay, I'm here to talk. You know, let's talk surrender." The gates open, and just one thing comes out, and that's the mouth of Sauron. You know, he is the physical entity of Sauron, as Sauron is speaking through this being. He's got this big ass crowned mask, and all you see is the mouth. And the mouth is really disgusting. And it's really cool how they did it, where he's got these cuts on the sides of his mouth, and every time he talks, the wounds like open up. It's pretty disgusting, but it's like if they would have kept that into the like original cut of the movie, it definitely would have won like best costume design, because the way they got the sores to open up every time he opened his mouth was a really nice touch. And I love Aragorn's reaction when he starts talking and does that creepy big Joker smile, and you see Viggo Mortensen just kind of look like, the hell is this guy? This guy is disgusting. Aragorn ends up basically decapitating this dude after he presents the Mithril that Frodo uses throughout the trilogy, saying that he's dead. And Merry and Pippin are like, "No, they can't be." Gandalf tells them to shut up and don't believe him. Aragorn, you know, slowly rides up to him. He's kind of eyeballing him down. Mouth of Sauron's talking crap. You know, "Oh, this is Isildur's heir, huh? What is he going to do?" And without missing a beat, Aragorn, you know, lets out that iconic Aragorn yell and just decapitates the dude right in front of everybody. And Gimli goes, "Well, I guess that concludes the negotiations then." And Aragorn says, "I don't believe it. Frodo is still alive. We will fight to protect him." So that's one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene. And it's an extended cut. I wish they would have added that into the original movie, even though it's creepy as hell. And then the next scene I have is basically right after this, where we have that big battle at the Black Gate. You have Aragorn going up against the big troll. You have Merry and Pippin cutting down orcs. You got Gandalf cutting down orcs. You got Gimli and Legolas fighting all over the place. And it's a really cool aerial shot where, and it's cool how, I don't know if Peter Jackson, like, I gotta imagine he purposely did this, but like, so you have the small like group of the good guys, we'll say, and they're surrounded by all the orc army from Mordor. It looks like an eyeball. And I gotta imagine that Peter Jackson did that on purpose, because, you know, the Eye of Sauron's right there, and the battlefield looks like an eye. It was pretty cool how they did that. But that's really cool action sequence. It's just pure chaos. It's just every character just kind of showing off their fighting skills against, you know, thousands upon thousands of orcs. Eventually, you know, the ringwraiths come in on their dragon look at things. Then the eagles come in. We get that really cool shot of Gandalf. Well, you know, he's covered in blood, orc blood. We get that little moth flying by, and we're like, "Oh, here comes the eagles." And you get that cool aerial shot of the eagles taking down all the ringwraiths in the air. It's really cool. Really incredible battle. I like the Black Gate battle. I think that one's my favorite. Next favorite would probably be Helm's Deep. But though it's tough between those two because I really like the Helm's Deep battle with like the rain and all that incredible like elf fighting techniques with the bows and all that. But the Black Gate battle is really really cool. I like everything that goes on in there with just the pure chaos and just seeing every character kind of show off their strength and their fighting techniques that they have learned throughout this entire trilogy. I really like the Black Gate battle. Then we get into the Mount Doom scene where Gollum bites Frodo's freaking finger off to get the ring. Now, again, I didn't read the book, but I did watch the old animated movies from like the 60s or 70s, I think is when it came out. So when this movie came out in 2003, I knew Frodo was going to get his finger bit off because I watched those animated movies. But still, seeing Elijah Wood get his finger bit off is pretty gruesome. And they did a really good job with the scene where, Sam eventually gets Frodo to the edge here to throw the ring in. Sam's like, "What are you waiting for? Just throw the ring into the fire." Frodo kind of turns around. He gives that weird, evil smile, and he goes, "The ring's mine." He puts it on, goes invisible. You get that iconic yell from Sam, "No!" And then Gollum shows up and bites Frodo's freaking finger off as they're fighting for the ring. But that's a really cool scene where they're fighting. Eventually, Gollum, gets thrown. They throw each other off the cliff. Frodo is smart enough to hang on to the side of the cliff with his 4 fingers, and Gollum ends up crashing into the lava pit with the ring, and we see Gollum, melt in, and then we eventually see the one ring get destroyed in the lava. So that was pretty cool. And then the last scene I have here is the Frodo, Gandalf, and Bilbo leaving with the elves as the movie wraps up. This was a big surprise for me where Gandalf turns to Frodo and he goes, "You ready, Frodo?" And the other 3 hobbits are like, "What is he talking about, Frodo?" Frodo is still, scarred from his experience with the ring, with the journey that him and Sam made. He's going to go retire with the elves along with Bilbo. And then, of course, Gandalf is basically done. His job in Middle-earth is done. They're going to go off with the elves and live out the rest of their lives with them. So really, really heartwarming and kind of bittersweet ending there. But we do get a cool montage with Sam kind of, returning back home with his family and writing and finishing off the book that Frodo and Bilbo started with Samwise Gamgee. So that wraps up the iconic scenes from the Return of the King extended edition. My favorite is probably the Mouth of Sauron scene. I wish they would have included that in the original cut. It's not very long, but I understand that the studio probably didn't want a 3.5 hour film in the theater, but I really like that Mouth of Sauron scene. Favorite quotes. Now, I wanted to try to limit it. There's so many freaking quotes in this movie that are awesome, but I did get it down to 1, 2, 3, like 7 or 8 quotes. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. We have the iconic line spoken from the entire trilogy. Aragorn looking back at the Gondor and Rohan army at the Black Gate. He goes, "For Frodo," and he runs out there by himself. A few seconds later, everybody run. It was quoted, and it's still quoted today. It's one of the most quoted lines is "For Frodo." Another one from Aragorn. These first 3 are from Aragorn. "My friends, you bow to no one." This, of course, is the scene where at his coronation in Minas Tirith, he eventually makes his way through everybody, and he gets to the 4 hobbits. They bow as paying respect to the new king of Gondor. And without missing a beat, Aragorn just kind of shakes his head and he goes, "My friends, you bow to no one." And then we get that shot of every single person at that coronation bowing to the 4 hobbits, showing respect as these 4 little halflings saved the entire Middle-earth. It's an incredible moment. It's a huge character moment for everybody in the movie, and the hobbits, realizing like, wow, we are the heroes of the story. These 4 little halflings from the Shire traveled all this way to save the entire world. It's a very, very heartwarming moment for sure. Then this last one I have from Aragorn is his big speech at the Black Gate. He goes, hold your ground, sons of Gondor, of Rohan, my brothers. I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship, but it is not this day. An hour of wolves and shattered shields when the age of men comes crashing down, but it is not this day. This day we fight. By all that you hold dear on this good earth, I bid you stand, men of the West. Of course, Viggo Mortensen does it way better than I do, and he even shouts it, but I do not want to kill my voice doing that. This is an incredible speech done by Aragorn. He has all the great lines in this trilogy. I think I mentioned it on the last episode, but they actually took a lot of these lines from Theoden. I might have mentioned it in here as well. Let me double check my notes here. I did not include it on this one, so I must have mentioned it last time on the Two Towers episode. But Aragorn does get a lot of the awesome quotes that, like Theoden would have did. Of course, Theoden is dead at this point, so Aragorn was really the only one to give it, and as the King of Gondor. But this quote here is freaking fantastic. It's well performed by Viggo. He did such an incredible job to hype up everybody, not just on the battlefield, but everybody in the audience. I remember watching this scene in the theater, and all these grown-ass men in the theater were just so hyped up by this speech, and we're like, let's freaking kill some orcs. Like, it's such a really good job by Viggo. This one from Legolas, what about side by side with a friend? This, of course, is responding to Gimli for saying, I never thought I'd fight side by side with an elf. And then that's when we cut to Legolas, and he goes, what about side by side with a friend? Gimli, of course, responds, I could do that, showing the friendship that him and Gimli have grown throughout this trilogy. I really want a Legolas and Gimli movie, or like a 3-season show of them like being buddies, doing adventures throughout Middle-earth. That would be awesome. This one from Sam. Come on, Mr. Frodo. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. Of course, being that scene where he realizes that Frodo has like 0 energy left. He can't physically make the climb. He can't obviously carry the ring for Frodo, so he's going to put Frodo on his shoulders and carry him up the mountain. This one from Gimli. That still only counts as one, as the Battle of Minas Tirith, where Legolas takes out an entire elephant of Easterlings, and Gimli's like, yeah, that still only counts as one, even though it's probably like 30 on their count. I mentioned this line already, but this one from Frodo, the ring is mine, with that evil smirk on his face when he was supposed to dump it in the fire. And then this last one from Galadriel. This task was appointed to you, Frodo of the Shire. If you do not find a way, no one will. Of course, we get that flashback of Frodo remembering those words from Galadriel. It's very, very encouraging line from Galadriel. So those are the favorite quotes of The Return of the King. Of course, there's probably like 20 other ones I could have added on there, but for time's sake, I wanted to at least pick out what I think was like the top 7 or 8 for sure. Let's get behind the scenes and jump into some of these fun facts. I have quite a bit of them here, so we'll kind of grind through them here. To get enough extras for the Battle of the Black Gate, a few hundred members of the New Zealand Army were brought in. They apparently were so enthusiastic during the battle scenes that they kept breaking the wooden swords and spears they were given. I mean, I would have did the same thing. That sounds like a lot of fun, being extras on a huge battle scene for Peter Jackson. The last shot of principal photography was when the newly crowned Aragorn bows to the 4 hobbits. Although Viggo Mortensen did not need to be on set for that day, he nevertheless insisted on attending. He didn't have a crown. It wasn't necessary. He wasn't even being filmed. So he fashioned one out of paper. With each successful take, the crown was becoming more ornate and sillier as crew members kept decorating it. So the 4 actors playing the hobbits often had difficulty suppressing their giggles when they were on scene. That's a really cool one. Andy Serkis and Elijah Wood were each given prop rings by Peter Jackson used in the movie. They, of course, both thought that they had the only one. That's pretty funny. Like Billy Boyd earlier in this movie, Viggo Mortensen composed the tune and sang the part to the song that Aragorn sings at his coronation. The translation of the Elvish words runs, "Out of the great sea to Middle Earth I am come. In this place I was abide, and my heirs unto the ending of the world." This, according to the book, the same verse Elendil sang when he first arrived in Middle Earth from Numenor. So I haven't talked about that at all. So, and I really wanted that to be in the iconic scenes. I probably should have included it in there. But that scene where Billy Boy, who plays Pippin, sings that song to Denethor was outstanding. I don't think I included that in the fun facts, but so the way that scene came about was, so they went out karaokeing and drinking like off camera when they're on their downtime in New Zealand, and they heard Billy sing at one of the karaoke ones. They're like, "Hey, we got to put a scene in the movie with Pippin singing," and that's kind of where that scene of Pippin singing to Denethor came about. Was this fun night that Billy and Elijah Wood and Sam and some of the other cast members went out and had a party karaokeing, and they wanted to include this. So I can't believe I forgot about that scene. I apologize to Billy Boyd and all those fans out there of that scene, but that's kind of another extra little fun fact for you if you didn't know that. That scene spawned out of a karaoke night while on set. The Lord of the Rings trilogy became the most nominated film franchise in Academy Award history, with 30 nominations, surpassing the Godfather trilogy, which had 29, and the Star Wars film franchise, which had 21. So really impressive Oscar run for the Lord of the Rings films, especially Return of the King. Viggo Mortensen estimates that during the course of filming the trilogy and including all of the takes, he killed every stuntman on the production at least 50 times. That's pretty impressive that he was keeping track of that. The battle scenes, which reportedly contained over 200,000 digital participants, are so huge that an extra room had to be built onto the Weta Digital's effects facility to house all the computer equipment needed to render the scenes. That is insane. Shelob's shriek is the combination of several elements, including the sounds of a plastic alien toy, steam hisses inspired by an incident where an alligator hisses at Sir Peter Jackson's daughter, Catherine Jackson, and the shriek of a Tasmanian devil. Interesting. A normal movie averages about 200 visual effects shots. This movie had 1,487 visual effect shots. That is freaking insane. And then the last fun fact I have for you all today, Elijah Wood was wrapped in a latex-like material that represented Shelob's webbing. On the DVD, he jokes that it is like being encased in the world's largest condom. That is freaking hilarious. So that is today's fun facts behind the scenes of Return of the King. To wrap things up before we get into the ranking segment of today's show, here are some changes that I could at least verify and confirm by multiple sources. Legolas and Gimli travel together in the book. They didn't so much in the movie, probably because of time. But there is large stretches of the book where it's just Legolas and Gimli traveling together. I wish they would do like I said, 3-season show or a movie where they're just traveling, going on adventures together. The movie downplayed Eowyn and Faramir's romance. We do get that kind of scene where Aragorn comes up to him. They kind of look at each other, kind of like hard eyes to each other. But I guess in the book, they actually have a full-blown romance. I think the movie just kind of hints that after this, they eventually fall in love and get together. But it sounds like the book actually gets deep in there, and they have a full-blown romance together. Aragorn kills the mouth of Sauron in the movie. He does not in the book. Movie portrays Denethor as a villain. He's not so much that way in the book. The Eye of Sauron was taken literally in the movie. In the book, Sauron is a blackened demon lord. That was more of a Peter Jackson iteration, I guess you could say, of the Eye of Sauron. He literally took it. It's a flaming eyeball in the sky. And then the last change that I could verify from the book to the movie, the scoring of the Shire was cut out of the movie. Frodo, Sam, and Pippin and Merry actually come home to Sauron's forces invading the Shire in the book. So Peter Jackson decided to not include that. They come back to the Shire. Everything's all good and plenty. But actually in the book, when they return to the Shire, they have to save everybody in the Shire and kill a bunch of orcs. So very curious to hear why he changed that. Probably that just wasn't his vision that he was going for. The only time we get the scorning of the Shire in the movie is like a premonition vision of Frodo when he's with Galadriel and Fellowship of the Ring. Other than that, we really don't get any mention of the scorning of Shire, but it sounds like that is a pretty big part in the book. So it's kind of surprising that Peter Jackson pretty much cut that out of the movie altogether. So those are the changes from the Return of the King that I could verify. But yeah, The Return of the King, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's the conclusion of this masterpiece trilogy that Peter Jackson gave us based on Tolkien's books. I watched this trilogy at least once a year. I think I'm going to start watching it more now because I had such a huge blast doing this on the podcast for y'all, reminiscing on my first time watching it as a kid to now. I don't know. I've probably seen The Return of the King probably 20 times. I've seen Two Towers probably 15 times. Fellowship of the Rings probably 15 to 16 times. I've definitely seen The Return of the King the most. But now it's tough to watch these as standalones. It's much more fun to just take a couple days and just grind through all 9 hours of the extended editions. I don't watch the theatrical versions anymore. In my mind, in my brain, the extended editions are the only way to do it. I block off huge chunks of time to watch the extended edition. I'm fine watching an extra 35 to 45 minutes of screen to get the full scope of Peter Jackson's vision of this trilogy. And I recommend it to everybody to watch the extended editions more. Not that the theatricals are bad. They're still masterpieces, but you just get more out of it and you get more content and more understanding of the story and the lore and the characters when you watch the extended edition. It's really fascinating. I absolutely love this trilogy and I can't wait to watch it again. I'm excited to do the Hobbit trilogy on this show next year. Even though those definitely they're not on the same level as Lord of the Rings, but I still have a lot of excitement and entertainment out of those movies. So very excited to dive into Hobbits. But that wraps it up for the conclusion of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We're going to head on over to the rankings, and then that'll be it for today's show. All right, so first we're going to rank the 3 installments of this main trilogy. We have the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. I'll say this right now: the Return of the King is number 1. That's number 1 on my list. It's always been my favorite. I think it's the best one out of this trilogy. It does a really awesome job at just concluding this huge story, this beloved story that we've all grown up and loved, and it's just a really, really fantastic way to end a trilogy. Now, 2 and 3, this is where I've kind of gone back and forth a lot throughout the years. But at number 2, this is where I'm going to put the Fellowship of the Ring. I really, really love the Fellowship of the Ring. For a while, it was number 3 on my list. But after rewatching it for the show and talking about it and breaking it down for everybody, I really, really like the Fellowship of the Ring. I love getting introduced to all these characters. We get the start of this long journey of Frodo and the One Ring as he sets to destroy it. Very, very awesome movie. I love it. And then, of course, that leaves the Two Towers at number 3, which I love the Helm's Deep fight. I love all the stuff that Frodo and Sam go through with Gollum and all that. But I think it is if you're going to choose a weaker one out of the 3, I think the Two Towers is a bit weaker. There's a lot more of like just people walking around or just talking in a room. You really stick around for that huge battle at the end with the Two Towers. Now, with me saying, it drags on with people walking around, it's still a fantastic movie. When you start really picking apart these movies, you have to rank them. and I feel like the Two Towers is the third on the list. It's the weaker, but not by a lot, but it's the weaker of the three, I think. So that is how I rank the trilogy. We have Return of the King, then the Fellowship, then the Two Towers coming in at last. So that is the ranking for the trilogy. Next, we're going to move on to Best in Show. Best in Show is making a comeback to cinematic reviews. Our nominees are Elijah Wood as Frodo Baggins, Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn, Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf. You can probably guess who I'm going to pick. That is Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn in The Return of the King. He gets a lot of awesome stuff to do. He gets that incredible speech. He gets the most quotable line ever as for Frodo. He cuts off the head of the mouth of Sauron like a badass. He gets that really incredible coronation scene where he's singing that elvish song. He's walking around in his new crown and his really cool outfit. He's just Viggo Mortensen just knocks it out of the park with Aragorn in this third movie. So he is the winner of Best in Show for The Lord of the Rings. Now, last thing to do on the list is the popcorn scale. You can probably guess what I'm going to give it based on the other two installments, and that is the Golden Popcorn Bucket. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's one of the greatest movies ever made in movie history. This is the poster child of the Golden Popcorn Bucket rating on the scale. So, Return of the King gets the top tier on the scale. Well, that'll do it for the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition series here on the show. As I said before, we will dive into the Hobbit films next year. That is on the schedule. We will do the extended versions of those as well. I think the extended editions of those do it a lot more justice than the theatrical ones. I think the theatrical ones miss a bunch of stuff that Peter Jackson had to cut out for studio reasons. So we're going to do the extended editions of those three as well. We've got the Wicked for Good review episode coming out this week. I had a really awesome time going to theater to that one finally. Then we'll continue Marvel Fridays on Friday with Captain America, the First Avenger. And then that, of course, will lead into the first Avenger movie next week, next Friday. I'm very excited to do the Avengers movie finally on here. And then, yeah, of course, check out the show every week. I try to pump out at least 2 episodes, sometimes 3 episodes a week. I also do the football podcast, the End Zone Report, if you are a football nuthead like me. So go ahead and check out that show every week where we tackle the NFL with reacting to the week and then predicting game outcomes for the previous week. We're on the last couple weeks of the regular season, and then we'll dive into all the craziness that is playoffs in the NFL. So a lot of fun things coming up for the football podcast as well. And a lot of fun things coming up too for the cinematic reviews. You know, we got the Avatar in a couple of weeks, release the Avatar 3 movie releasing in theaters. We'll have a Christmas episode that'll drop on Christmas Eve so that you can check it out with all your family members. We're going to keep the movie a secret though. I will reveal that movie probably the week before, just so you guys have time to watch it before the episode comes out. But we're gonna keep that movie a little bit of a secret. We're gonna wait until at least we'll probably announce it on the Marvel Friday episode that comes out on December 19th. I think I'll reveal that movie on that episode. So again, check out the show every week on YouTube. Check out the social media pages on X, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm going to post all the artwork from this episode on there and then all the episodes previously as well. So enjoy the week. Come back for Marvel Friday on Friday and then tune in for that Wicked episode when that drops this week as well. Later, everybody.